You know what? The multifamily industry doesn't have an AI adoption problem. It has a literacy problem. Most teams are still trying to figure out what AI actually is, let alone how to use it. And that gap is leading to hesitation, bad decisions, and a lot of noise. So today we're going to simplify it. I'm joined by Tamela Coval, who's a partner in Multifamily NEXT, amongst seems like 100 other things. And she and I are breaking down what actually happened when they put operators in a room and tried to teach AI. And what most of the industry still doesn't understand is the difference between tools that respond and systems that actually do the work. Let's get into it. Tamela, welcome to the show.
Daniel, I haven't seen you in forever. What's up?
It's great to have you on. I really appreciate it. We have known each other for a long time, and it seems like every time we connect, and you've always got something interesting going on, and I know that's the case today. I want to make sure we talk about that. But before we get started, for those who inexplicably don't know who you are or what your background is, take a minute and share with us about kind of like your journey, how you started in the business, and what you're doing today. Maybe touch on Multifamily NEXT, which is something you guys are doing, so people have some sense of like arc of your career and kind of like the authority really that you're coming to this discussion and perspective.
You bet. I've got divide my life up into chunks, right? And my entire career has been dedicated to multifamily. Even that's not what I studied in college, but my entire career, I launched after moving into an apartment community. And when I moved to Dallas, Texas, and they asked me, oh, well, we know you're going to be interviewing for jobs out here. Would you like to work with us? I got into multifamily. And that was in 1981. I stayed in that position for about 13 years, moved through the ranks, worked in new development, startup, construction, creating new leases for properties, opening up new markets in different states, different cities in those states, and moved up to become an asset manager, and then was recruited over to the supplier partner side, which was a print magazine, apartment guide at the time, until we launched aptguides.com. That is how we marketed the first ILS that in 1997 launched overnight. There were 18,000 listings on the internet. I'm like, what's that, right? And did that, loved that, had a great family with that. We just had a family reunion because many of us worked together for 30 years or 20 years and continue to work together. And then several of us realized, well, the print magazine is not going to go away at this organization. We need to spend our distribution dollars, our marketing and advertising dollars to that online feature, which some of the leadership at the Apartment Guide weren't buying into that who's going to lease an apartment online? Seriously?
Yeah.
So we developed RentWiki. Yep. We developed RentWiki, which then as we exited RentWiki, we sold it to Apartment List. And with the RentWiki package, I was exposed to social media, reputation, customers talking back to you. What? We couldn't shove information out anymore. We had to do more listening than we had to do speaking. And that was a terrific experience in learning on a startup organization and how difficult that is. You go from having a $1 million a week at an NAA Expo budget for Apartment Guide, and you bring 170 people in to work that week-long conference, and so you go from that kind of a budget to do you have 50 cents that I can borrow to make a phone call? That's pretty much the budget that you have as a startup.
Yeah, right.
And you have familiarity with that. Yeah. And then NMHC reached out at one point as RentWiki was doing. We were in the process of exiting, and NMHC said, you're always searching for what's next. You're always looking at trends. You're always looking at where we go from here. And our leadership at NMHC has no operator experience, has no supplier partner experience, and we've got our heads down and buried in, looking at legislative things. And, we're trying to make this organization different and focused on different things. Would you be interested in a consulting partnership with us and help us identify those trends that are happening in the outside world? And we're not doing them yet in multifamily, but we should be, and we
Nice.
can. So that's where my consulting business came. And then Daniel, on one of my consulting contracts with Court Furniture, that's where I met you and was
Yeah.
in the launch pad room when I think you and Leonardo 24/7 won the launch pad award that year. And I'm like, yeah, I need to get to know that guy. I need to get to know that product. And so that's kind of, my curious nature, my curiosity. And like Alice in Wonderland, as you know, sometimes I go down rabbit holes. But my curious nature was kind
No.
of satisfied there for a while. And that's what I've been focusing on. I work with supplier partners who are new to the space, and I prefer to call them implementation partners. I hate the word vendor. I really hate the word supplier too, but we seem to like labels in our industry, so that works. So that's kind of where I am, and
Mhm.
I'm very interested in, you and I reconnected at OpTech this last year, 2025, and very interested in what you're doing, and I love your Brew logo behind you
Yeah,
in
you
the
love it when
newsroom there, in the newsroom,
yes at Podcast Central here.
Podcast
Um,
Central.
but yeah, you when I saw you, I really that's the genesis of today's discussion is when I saw you at OpTech, you were talking about Multifamily Next,
Hmm.
and which I think is a very timely initiative because of what's happening in AI.
Hmm.
Obviously, from my perspective at Vendoroo, I'm all for education for the masses on AI. But you said something interesting that I wanted to start with today, which was that Multifamily Next. And forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but Multifamily Next was really intended to be a hands-on seminar where folks would actually create something useful in AI,
Hmm.
right? At the end of that. I know that what you stated that was one of your objectives. And yet when in the first one that you held in Dallas, what you shared was that you were surprised at how you really needed to come down to table stakes and like, what is AI?
Yeah.
And you really needed to start there before like nobody was ready to start jumping into creating agentic or anything like people need to understand, well, what is AI versus like a chatbot, right? And
Yes.
so one of the things we thought we'd talk about today is have this episode serve as the primer for anybody
Hmm.
who's interested in exploring AI, adopting AI, to just kind of understand, especially through the lens of a multifamily industry expert, what is AI? What does it mean in our industry? And what are these different terms used? So let's kind of start with the history of this, Tamela. The early phases of AI were essentially chatbots, right?
Yes, they were beyond the Terminator. I've said before, I'm kind to my little AI agents that I create because they may come and take over the world one day, and
You were
I
even
want to
nice
be
to the
nice.
chatbots.
I'm nice. I say please and thank you. My father was military and my family was born again Christian. So, you be nice, you say please and thank you, and there you go. So, yeah, I'm nice to my chatbots. Yeah, but they weren't really chatbots when we first started seeing what came out as chatbots on websites or on text. They were widgets. And there's a big difference because widgets are programmed to, just here's about 3,000 questions people could ask, but they can only really respond with one or two answers. They don't deviate. And let's clarify this too. AI doesn't think. It doesn't think. What AI does, which is of course it's a series of numbers and goes out into the infinity to look for any reference to what you're asking at this speed that is just incredible. You ask a question and already those three or four little dots start thinking on you, or my Claude goes round and round, or Perplexity does something different, but that it's thinking, but it really doesn't. It just searches for information that
Mhm.
matches what you've put in there. A widget on a website is, for example, I was sharing with you in an earlier discussion, I was really frustrated yesterday. I was trying to get information on a specific thing. It wasn't that hard. And this was a significant brand, a hospitality brand. And I was trying to, and they say, here's our AI Grace or whatever her name was. And I kept saying, no, I want to know, do you have a shuttle from the airport? Airport shuttle, transport from
Yeah.
airport.
And
And
it's like, you
it
want to
was,
order a pizza? Like,
you
no.
want to order a pizza? No, that's not what I want. So it can be incredibly headbanging, frustrating. So
Yeah.
what does that do? It creates a bad customer experience. And at the end of the day, Daniel, what you've devoted your career to, whether it was, because you're an operator, you're an owner, or you have been, I don't
Yeah.
know the current state of affairs, and that's right. And you're also a tech entrepreneur. The customer journey, it doesn't matter if it's a renter journey or a prospect journey or, a supplier partner journey or an employer journey or an investor journey. There's customer journeys that are the reasons why we are in business, because we pay attention to the customer journey. And anytime there's that hiccup, like, no, I don't want a pizza, I just want a flippin' ride from the airport, right? That just breaks that whole train of thought, if you will, which train would have been a good alternative for transport, I suppose. But that's what we're trying to help people understand, what AI and the difference between AI and agents and widgets, and AI agents that are agentic, that it looks like they're thinking, but they can respond and they can pivot. Bringing my old Ross from Friends, pivot into the conversation. I wanted him to be the mascot for Multifamily Next because we did have to pivot at Multifamily Next. People, and we're talking C-suite individuals, VPs, SVPs of training, of IT, somebody who's big in one of the largest state association. That individual is the association chair today, and they were part of our attendees, and they were like, I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't get it. So we
Yeah.
had
Let's,
to go
before we
back.
go into that, I want to frame properly what you just said, because it's important. And that is because I think people still confuse AI with these chatbots and these widgets you were talking about. So chatbots and widgets were really a way to implement, were a fancy way of saying how you were going to implement a chatbot. But chatbots were a fixed set of answers to a preset anticipated
Correct.
set of questions, right? And anytime you went outside of those questions, it didn't know what to say. And when you asked one of those questions, it only knew the one thing to say. And so that was the frustrating experience that changed dramatically with the introductions of the LLMs. So most
Right.
people know the ChatGPT. There are certainly others. And so LLMs, without getting too nerdy here, tokenized those inputs
Yep.
and then sort of predicted based on its knowledge kind of what the best answer would be, like what the next word really should be in the answer. And that's kind of how that worked. But it very much feels like a thoughtful, even empathetic response. So
Hmm.
so now chatbots have been, or at least by now they very well should have been, replaced with LLM backed interfaces that are actually responding with an understanding of the context of what you're asking.
Yes.
All right. So that's what happened to us 2 years ago. And that really kind of set AI on fire, was the emergence
Hmm.
of the LLMs. Now you touched on agents
Hmm.
and sort of agentic AI. So LLMs, ChatGPT, the early incarnations, you could ask it a question, it would respond. Give me a contract that for consulting with Tamela Coval, and it would create a contract, right?
Yes.
Agentic functionality allows the AI to use tools. Instead of just asking a question, you can say, use Excel and do this thing, log into LinkedIn and do this thing, and compile all of that in a Word document and then save that to my Gmail, my Google Drive. So
Yep.
agents can now do these things and do work and use tools. And that's now what separates agentic AI from just sort of a responsive LLM.
Yes.
So
Yes.
with that as context, you brought folks together to learn about this in Dallas,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you were just giving some examples of the breadth of the kind of people that attended there.
Right.
And what were your takeaways from that?
Takeaways were actually some that assumptions that I had made ahead of time that were off base. Certainly, Tammy Sarek, my partner, who Tammy's off the charts, brilliant. Her background comes from a deep technology. For your geek audience out there, she worked with the Pentium chip when it was first. She launched it in Germany at an international forum back in, like, I don't know, when was Pentium chip launched? Late 80s, early 90s, and then sold her company to Symantec. Right. So she's geek woman on steroids, and she's the oracle, I think, for multifamily artificial intelligence. There are a lot of bros out there that are talking about it, and some of them are really on point. But what we learned at Next was that first event was that it didn't matter your level in the company, your position in the company, and quite frankly, we haven't had any site level individuals in there into multifamily next workshops. But if we did, or if we surveyed a company, we would be finding our on-site teams using agents, AI agents, to help them in some everyday tasks, as opposed, do that in 2 minutes and then check it for an hour, as opposed to spending 2 days or 3 days on a market survey. Artificial intelligence can do that very quickly. So we're finding that the boomers and the Gen X's are the ones that have been the most inquisitive about AI in business. The Gen Zs use it for creating TikToks and unfortunately used Grok for imaging, and we don't want to do that, right? That's a Pandora's box that probably needs to stay closed. And that's Elon Musk's artificial intelligence organization.
And what did you hear from them? Like, what's the entry point right now for AI with these companies? What are they interested in deploying first right now?
So I sat with, we moved from, Tammy and I would move from table to table, and Jamie Gorski was with us on that Dallas tour. And we moved from table to table as people were learning and creating. They create as they learn. So the next talks, we're going to talk about how to work on your renewal letters. And so what we did is we build agents, AI agents. We teach them how to do that with Legos day one, to get that hands-on, getting your brain working at building things, really building things, and then digitally building things, right? So we would sit together with individual teams who wanted individual help, and they were like, I really didn't want to do this elementary part of multifamily next. I was going to skip it and go to the next level.
Yeah.
I thought I knew about AI. I didn't. I didn't know a thing about, all of the things all of the things you could do with AI. B, all of the different options. What? There's more than Chat GPT? And wait, is Chat GPT the one I want to use? Or are there some alarm bells in there about that one? Or is Grok the one we want to use? Or are there alarm bells in there? What about Claude? Is Claude boring? I don't want to use Claude. Perplexity? What the heck is that? Kimmy? Right? So they just, everybody was really focused on, I say everybody, the group was focused on ChatGPT. And then what I did also learn is a lot of property management companies are using the Microsoft, of course, Azure platform, the enterprise platform, because they need that SOC 2 compliance, right? To keep everything, PII, personal information for the residents, keep that contained, you know, keep your corporate financial records contained, right? So you work on that enterprise platform that's known as SOC with SOC 2 compliance, and Azure by Microsoft is that platform that many are using. And so they're using Copilot. And so going to as we pivoted, we're going to use more explanations on the different personalities that Claude's got a bunch of tools. It's not just one Claude. There's he or she, they can speak in a whole bunch of different languages. They excel at different things. So it's like having a family with siblings, and each one has inside of Claude, and each one has an expertise area that if you're going to create a spreadsheet, use this. If you're going to, write something else, use that personality of Claude. So we
Yeah.
backed up, we pivoted, and we started with, this is ChatGPT.
Yeah.
This is what it did in the first, year of existence. This is what it's doing now. This is what it's predicted to do, 2 years from now. And guess what? It's already doing it now. It learns so fast. And the other thing that was, I guess, the biggest takeaway
Yeah.
for both
People
Tammy
really
and
just
I,
need to
and for the
understand.
people,
Yeah.
and for the, yeah.
So you really didn't talk about AI for leasing, AI for maintenance, like with Vendor. How would you suggest then that what mindset should organizations have as they think about whether or not it's right for them to bring AI into their company at this juncture?
That's a good question. That's a really good, I hate it when people say, oh, well, that's a great question, but it really is. And
I'm
I
good
think
with great questions. I'm not so good
it's a
with
great
great
question.
answers.
I think that's the strength that our visionary leaders really need to focus on. That's the thing that they need to focus on right now, not adopting AI. Oh yeah, let's buy that. It's got AI. Or let's don't buy that because it's got AI and I don't understand it. Well, okay, that's, we could talk about being an ostrich and bury your head in the sand, because the people who do not embrace the positive aspects of artificial intelligence and those AI agents, getting rid of all, let the bots do the busy work. Let your people be people. Let your team do what they're supposed to do and take care of the customer, right? That customer journey. So what should they do? They should use a lot of judgment. I think that's one of the most important aspects of where we are. I shared an article yesterday on LinkedIn about, the biggest thing in AI right now is judgment. And really if you're the COO, CEO, whatever, take a hard look at, we're using it in, working with ILSs, or we're using it in working with lease applications. A chat agent can tell you as a prospect where to go next, what to do. It helps you go through that process as a prospective resident looking to look at an apartment community, or, oh, I like that one, let's go ahead with the application process, right? So that's where
Yeah.
people are using a lot of AI right now. And fraud prevention. But, let's take, for example, Vendoroo. you know okay, you're going to use AI in maintenance? Oh, well, heck yeah. And so what does that do to my maintenance team and who I hire, and what skills I'm looking for in my maintenance team or my service team, right? Because now, artificial intelligence can take care of diagnostics and troubleshooting, predictive and preventative maintenance, market ready units. How many units are market ready and ready for move in? Or, work order management, processing, linking into the resident portal. That my experience in talking with operators is they just think about AI and leasing. Some of the smarter ones are
Yeah.
not smarter. That's not fair. Some of the more exposed ones are thinking about it in fraud prevention and application and things like that. Then that next level is thinking about it. How's it going to help me in, so Vendoroo has AI. What does that mean in maintenance? I just want
Yeah.
the toilets fixed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's easier to conceptualize how AI works in leasing. And leasing was the kind of lower hanging fruit. It was
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
The data points you needed to be effective were easier. Maintenance was a lot harder, but the dynamics are very different because leasing AI actually did like replaced people, like leasing agents. Didn't need as many leasing agents to set appointments on that anymore, and you didn't need that anymore. Whereas within maintenance, what's happening is, you are allowing AI to do the work that the maintenance people don't want to do to begin with. Like you're allowing AI to do the triage and to deal with the residents and to field their questions and their anger, and, and be patient with them to describe exactly what it is. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
broken. It's not just like the thing that's blue in my whatever is like,
Right.
no, like take a picture, describe that.
Yes.
So technicians don't want to do that work. And frankly, they're not the best people to do that work. Like their strength is not necessarily resident relations, right? They want to get out there and they want to fix stuff. So in
Right.
the world of maintenance, what AI does is strips away all of that administrative work. As you were touching on some of this, like the triage, diagnostics, and then creating work orders and updating work orders with statuses. To relieve your technicians of all of that is to create a better work-life balance for them,
Yes.
right? And I think that's the lovely thing about what we're doing.
Well, and the other thing too, Dan, yes, 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 you're right. And thank you for, flavoring that in there because that's good stuff. But, as an operator, as an on-site leasing agent or an on-site manager or a regional director, if you've got a cranky maintenance individual on your team, holy moly, that's suicide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Because what do we know? I'm teeing you up here for the softball. What do we know about maintenance and resident renewals?
we know that poor maintenance service at an apartment community means people move out.
Yeah.
And those maintenance individuals, when they're in those apartment units, many times, especially in these days where people are, working remotely, many times the resident, more so than any other time, the resident is in the apartment home while the service is being performed. So the maintenance guy hears firsthand, I cannot believe that it's 98 degrees in Atlanta in August, and it's taken me, how long to get you in here or to
Yeah.
schedule a maintenance and repair. They can be either your best employee or the toughest employee to keep, number one, to keep, and then number two, to motivate and keep happy because they see everybody, the residents, with their at-home manners. People who use their at-home manners and not their, oh, I'm polite outside, but I can be, cranky in my own house. When somebody is not happy, a maintenance individual knows it and they
Yeah,
feel
that's
it
right.
and
And
they just
a
get
lot of
beaten
that,
up.
yeah. And you're saying some of it's in person, but a lot of it is often, via text message and have
Right.
AI be more responsive in a polite way, in a
Yes.
thorough way, really improves the resident experience. Let me ask you this, because we just got a
Mhm.
few minutes left. I'd love you to
Sure.
kind of round things out here with what do you think the message should be from leadership to their teams regarding AI right now? From you were talking about you mentioned like the senior, maybe the more evolved leaders within the industry. What
Mhm.
should the message be from them to their teams who might be worried about what
Mhm.
AI means for them? What do you think the message should be about
I
the emergence of AI here in the multifamily industry?
I researched this. I've been curious about, what the best teams do. Let me say this.
Yeah.
Matthew Woods, he's the CEO at Apartment List, and I know I've spoken of Apartment List twice. I really like them. I also feel like a birth mother because we sold Rent Wiki to them. But Matthew had their entire Apartment List organization in all of their markets in overseas, wherever they've got employees. Today is AI Awareness Day, and they've blocked that out for every employee
Hmm.
to not work on work, but to understand, learn more about AI. And he's given guidelines, which that's key. You have to have, when I go bowling, I really stink at it. So I do the kitty bumper guards, right? So I'm at least halfway better. You got to put those bumper pads up so you don't get sued because who wants to walk around in an orange jumpsuit picking up trash?
Oh my
We'll go to
gosh.
jail. We'll go
Tamela,
to jail.
is that what waits on the other side of those that
It
adopt
just
AI?
might. It just might
Is it?
because in October of last year, 13 property management software companies received warning letters from the FTC
With
saying you are in
respect to the,
violation. Fee
yeah,
transparency, yeah, the big ugly.
revenue
Fee
management software.
transparency,
Yeah.
correct. And revenue management, you got to make sure that any AI agents that are in your workflow systems for a prospect need to be able to pull up real fees, real rents, and not, surprise them when they show up to sign a lease. That's a big deal. And there are 5 or 6 states. Colorado is one of the biggest ones 5 or 6 states that have already, made some specific do not, thou shalt nots regarding artificial intelligence or regarding fee transparency or several aspects that AI agents impact. They're already, out there legislating. The Trump administration, he's gung ho on technology and things like that and wants to control that at a federal
Well,
level. I
Tamara, if
don't
you
know
don't
that
mind me
that's the right thing
saying
to do.
this,
Sure.
it feels like when I ask, hey, what should the message be? Your message is tinged with a lot of fear. You need to have awareness. You're going to end up in an orange jumpsuit if you do it wrong. People were sued from revenue management. The
Hmm.
government's going to come in and like, is that how you think most of the industry views AI, with this level of fear?
Yep. I think a lot of COOs and CEOs, and I've talked to them, before we started Next, before we really got into marketing it. That was one of my big tasks was I want to know where operators are right now. They've got so many things that they have to be proficient at. And then along comes what? An AI agent? I've got to learn that too. So they're wary of it. They're leery of it. There's been very little guidance until recently from NMHC and NAA. Prior to last year, you didn't see much guidance on it. And in October of last year, NAA, Tammy and I have had several conference calls with both NAA and the RETC team at NMHC. And they're all, everybody's trying to figure out how to frame it. That's why Multifamily Next, why we built it, is we've got to learn AI literacy before you start rolling it out. Use that AI judgment that I talked about a little bit earlier and get literate. Understand what it is, how it can benefit you, because the benefits are enormous. You mentioned it just a few minutes ago, and this, you can tell that AI agent to do this for you and load it up, and we want to create a PowerPoint slide and posts for LinkedIn and a slide carousel, and I want this and that. But what we also have to do is give it those bumper guards, right? Give it those AI governance guardrails. What about fair housing? What about the fee transparency and AI regulation? What about fraud prevention? What about cybersecurity? So when I'm building my AI agents, I say to them, you are an on-site leasing agent, and you're wanting to create meaningful experiences and meaningful dialogue between you and resident and John Jones in number 202. And you know that John has a love for dogs, get really personal. And you, as the leasing agent, are bubbly and fun and you like new things, but you want to have a meaningful conversation and not waste his time. He didn't care about your new shoes, right? So, but you want to personalize that for John Jones in Unit 202. That AI agent can do that.
Yeah.
And I want to have my company logo on it. I want to make sure I'm following my policies and procedures for my company. I want to make sure I'm following the marketing program for my company. And I want to make sure that I'm in those boundaries that, my leadership has given me
Yeah.
with my vision and my brand. So you create those guardrails and those policies and procedures, as you are very familiar with coming from Leonardo.
Yeah.
Create that in your agents.
And well, that's almost the easy part. I think the
That's the
hard,
easy part.
yeah. I mean, well, because loading up your policies and procedures into an agent and having them follow those is actually, pretty easy.
It's
But
very simple.
the trust part that you were kind of alluding to earlier, I think is what we're seeing evolve right now. And in fact, I think one of the things that allows people to have trust in the Vendoroo platform is that there's a human in the loop contingent. There's a separate AI
Correct.
kind of watching to make sure what the normal AI is doing is acceptable and kind of raising its hand if anything feels a little off. And then there's trained humans who understand maintenance who are involved in those moments who can make a judgment
Yes.
call whether or not the AI is doing the right thing or not. And that helps convey trust and kind of
Yes.
alleviate some of the concerns people have. Because when the resident experience is on the line, you can't trust AI 100% of the time to get it right. Having humans in the loop, I think, certainly now and probably for a long time, is going to be key to managing the edge cases when odd things happen that are outside of
Yes.
where AI has been trained. Having humans in the loop is probably necessary to create an end-to-end trustworthy experience.
It certainly is. It
Yeah.
certainly is. And you made a reference, Daniel, earlier about, we don't need leasing agents to do these tasks anymore because artificial intelligence can do it for us. Well, that's true. However, you take that leasing agent who used to spend 70% of his or her time doing reports. I've got, four
Yes.
children, two of them are in
It's a
property
great point
management,
to
right?
make.
Or you take a great leasing agent and you promote them up. This happened to me. I was a killer leasing agent. And then they made me an assistant manager. Oh my gosh, it was boring. It was horrible. It was awful. But I knew I needed it if I was going to move up in my career. So think of it as a capability roadmap, right? And there's this now with artificial intelligence, our career roadmaps. And this goes back to where you asked the question about what should leaders be thinking about and talking about to their team members. There's, we don't have a ladder anymore with our career. Artificial intelligence has branches or a jungle gym. I read an article the other day about AI is a jungle gym within a career roadmap within a company. What does
Yeah.
that mean? Well, I can swing from the monkey bars over to the slide, right? And I can go from the slide I'm still moving, I'm still growing, I'm still changing as a human in the loop. But now I can stay in leasing leadership, or I could brand into customer experience, revenue management, marketing management, centralization. I know that's been all the buzz. Now are we still thinking centralization? But so what AI does is it enables for leasing, personalized leasing at scale. So personal that I can go, John Jones in room unit 202, works at this company, loves dogs, right? So I can personalize my messaging directly to John Jones. So it amplifies that human connection. It doesn't replace it. And that's what we're teaching at Multifamily Next. You've got to be wary. You've got to be aware. And if you don't have AI literacy, if you don't practice it, if you don't learn how to use it and learn what it is, you could get in big trouble. So,
That's a great place
yeah,
to kind of, I think it's a great thought to wrap up with here, Tamela. And I'll just restate it kind of with my own lens. And that is that you were saying this about leasing, but it also applies to the maintenance teams. And that is
absolutely.
what AI is doing is relieving your leasing agents and your maintenance teams of the drudgery that was just once part of the job. You got to, make the appointments and you got to make the follow-up calls and track everything in your CRM, or you've got to like create the work order and capture all the discussions with the residents in that work order so that like all of that drudgery is now being relieved from these teams,
Exactly.
allowing them for, as you were saying, more on the leasing side, more personal interaction. You could never afford the time to do that. And on the
You
maintenance
bet.
side, allowing you to create, do more work, finish more work orders, increase your work order completion velocity, and in all cases, increase, I think, the quality of work-life balance. And that's what AI is
Absolutely.
offering today that I think is underappreciated. So I think it's a great point to end with here, Tamela. Thank you for that.
You got it. You got it.
If people are interested in participating in Multifamily Next, how do they do so?
Go to multifamilynext.com and register. We'll be in 9 more cities this year. Atlanta is coming up, followed by Phoenix, and then Charlotte, and all the cities are on the website. There's 9 other cities, but multifamilynext.com. You can reach out to me. My information is on LinkedIn, and I'm usually the only Tamela Coval that you'll meet. So, yeah, go sign up for Next because that's what's next.
Or if they're interested in getting, consulting with
Yeah.
you on kind of like their overall technical and operational
Mm-hmm.
strategy. So reached out to you through LinkedIn.
You bet. Thanks,
Okay.
Daniel. I
All right.
appreciate that plug.
Fun chat as always, Tamela. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
sir.
I'm sure I'll see you soon.
I appreciate the experience and having to whittle it all down.
Well, there's a lot to discuss, and it leads to a lot of whittling to make it digestible. It's true.
Right.
All right.
Oh, I do want to, one more thing.
Yeah.
One last thing,
Yes.
completely off subject.
Okay. Go for it.
Zach Galifianakis is going to show up in New Orleans June the 15th for a multifamily version of Between Two Ferns. And we have a very interesting lineup of guests and a very interesting Zach Galifianakis. And you know a little bit about that, Daniel. I don't know if you
I
want to elaborate.
I encourage everyone to attend. I think that's going to be a hoot. I'm sure
Yeah.
Zach is immensely entertaining. I don't
It's
know.
a Zach
I don't know how
attack,
you got
baby.
Zach Galifianakis to show up, but boy, hats off to you. You must know some people.
I do.
Looking forward
Let's
to
have
it.
a Zach attack in June in
Presuming
New
I'll be
Orleans.
there.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Tamela. Let's see you.
Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it.